So welcome to Seen and Solved. I'm your host, Tim Pennington. Today, we're talking about the foundation of a great finish, which is the pretreatment. From setting goals and choosing the right chemistry to training operators and keeping quality on track, Hubbard-Hall's new business development manager, Raihl, is going to share a step-by-step approach to building a pretreatment process that delivers lasting performance. We're going to cover what to look for, how to fine-tune performance, and the simple rules that will keep quality on track.
You're listening to the Seen and Solved podcast, brought to you by Hubbard-Hall. Better results, less chemistry.
So, Gary, I appreciate you joining us. I understand you've been with Hubbard-Hall for a hot minute. Why don't you give us everybody a little background of your career and what led you to Hubbard-Hall?
Career-wise, started out in powder coatings many, many years ago. Worked for the old Morton powder coatings prior to them being bought by numerous companies after that. I was there for 10 years. I worked in the sales position there, transitioned over into chemicals, was part of the new Nalco chemical development when Calgon, Texo, and Chemical Technologies all combined into Nalco. So from there on, I've been a chemical guy, have worked with numerous companies within the industry, and it's been a great experience. Learned a lot, met a lot of great people, and have enjoyed everything to this date. As far as being with Hubbard-Hall, situations arise that made it very easy for me to make a decision to transition to Hubbard-Hall. I'm very happy to be here and looking forward to the future.
Yeah, they're a little semi-startup company of 175 years, so they've been around for a while. I guess you had some interactions with them over in your career before coming.
I have. It's a little bit different industry, though. I grew up in the pretreatment industry. Really, in the Northeast, have not seen Hubbard-Hall all that much in my area, which I'm based out of Reading, Pennsylvania. So, yes, Palladium Chemicals, wastewater treatment. Heard about them. Have always seen them at various shows. One of my mentors is Sergio Mancini, who is well respected. Sergio since retired, and honestly, Sergio is one of the people that I consulted in making the change to Hubbard-Hall, and he had nothing but great things to say about him. So very excited to be here.
Let's talk about pretreatment. First question I want to ask you is, what's the first thing you look for when you're somebody's asked you to come in and assess their pretreatment line? What's the first thing you're going to look for?
Number of stages is probably going to be the most critical thing. So they're going to have, we'll just go through a conveyorized spray system. So they're going to have basically anywhere from 3 to maybe 7 or 8 stages. So based on that, you're going to make a determination about what type of chemistry is going to work and be most suitable for what they're trying to accomplish. You're also looking at the process that they're currently using now to be sure that you have something that's going to be able to improve that process based on whatever competitors' products that they're using. So it's a step-by-step process, and working with the operators, the people on the floor, engineer department, you name it. And basically, at the end of the day, you're trying to get to a point where you're providing the most astute process in order to maximize the performance results.
Every facility has its own goals, whether it's E-coat, powder coat. How do those affect what you're trying to do when you're going to do an assessment? I mean, I'm sure you sit down and talk with them about it beforehand and get an idea, but how does that affect what you're going to be doing with them?
It's critical. It's probably the most important part of the process, is making sure you identify what your customer's end goal is, where it's going to next as far as salt spray requirements, any type of Caterpillar approvals, anything that you're working with from a standpoint of approval process, you need to know that up front. So again, it goes back to significant meetings with key personnel, making sure you select the right process and move forward from there.
Yeah, I guess when you're looking at these, there's a lot of variables. What I was going to ask you about is tank materials. How does that play into what the material that it's made of affect into what your planning is for that system?
Again, goes back to being another one. You say everything's critical when you get to this point. So tank composition is so important, because based on the length of the tanks themselves and how long they've been in the area itself, you're looking for products that are not going to attack the tank. You cannot afford to take a chance with an acidic product going in and you're going to eat that tank. So you need to be able to adjust your products based on what their current system is. A lot of pretreatment suppliers and chemical suppliers will come in, try and fixate on what they know works best for their own process. It really doesn't matter. It has to, confine with what the structure of those tanks are. It's just critical in order to, you may not see the damage initially. 3, 4, 5 months later, all of a sudden you've got a leak, and 9 times out of 10, it's from your chemistry.
A heads up, I don't say they should have known it, but if they got great advice, they would have probably been cut off at the pass before using something like that, right? You got to have somebody that knows what they're talking about with that. No, I was going to say time, temperature, concentration. Well, let's talk about that for a bit, how important that is in the process.
There's 3 components to a good pretreatment process or a good chemical use, so to speak, and you're going to have time, which time is basically the amount of time that's going to be within each stage of your process. So you may have a 5-stage system. You're going to run it, say, 6 feet a minute. You're going to be in that tank. Typically for a cleaner stage, you need to be in there for 90 to 120 seconds. So that is going to be critical, because if you don't get 90 to 120 seconds, you're only going to get 60 seconds. The components change. So in a best case scenario, time, temperature, and concentration, that means that you can run it optimal. But when you can't, you're going to be adjusting one or the other to sacrifice what you've lost. So if you're losing temperature, you're going to run at a higher concentration for the most part. If you're losing time, there again, you're going to turn the heat up. You're going to do some things here that you have to get creative. And that truly comes with trial and error and running a system with the operators and making sure that at the end of the day, you're testing to the parameters that you should be getting. So if there is an issue at the end of the day with pretreatment, the first thing everyone ever looks for is water break-free substrate. So if it comes down the line and all of a sudden you see a little bit of beating up on that metal and you're not getting consistent flow on the part itself where it's sheeting, you got an issue. So time, temperature, and concentration, probably the 3 biggest words in chemistry from a standpoint of performance. So hopefully that helps.
And taking a close look at each one of those, you can't really get unbalanced with one that's going to affect the other. It surely is. So the process of validating, when you've got requirements, but the shop's got requirements that they need to meet. How do you validate that what you're proposing is going to be able to meet that requirements that they have?
Well, for the most part, you're still going back to the testing process, and you're going to be doing a lot of lab work, a lot of testing for salt sprays. Again, I went back to earlier as far as clean metal. You should be able to see that during the process. Normally, you'll use the customer's metal to validate your process, and you got to run that through. And then, we'll take it to the pretreatment side. If we got to check for coating weights, things like that, we'll do that. And at the end of the day, also, we'll work with the finishing companies in order to test for the salt spray requirement that may be. Steel, typically anywhere from 300 to 700 hours of salt spray. For aluminum, we have the AMA requirements, and those could be anywhere up to 6,000 hours. So that becomes very critical in working with your finishing contacts and making sure you've got a great relationship with the Sherwin-Williams and the IFS and Tiger Drylac, who's ever out there, in order to have them work with you and do the required performance testing as well. So you want to be able to do it in an in-home process, as well as have it verified by your finishing partner, so to speak.
And even further going on, let's talk about the quality control logs. Those are something that I know I'm sure you all feel is very important that they keep those up to date, and simply because it's going to be able to track the quality that they're going for, right?
It's a reference sheet more than anything else. So yes, if at the end of the day, we may set up a 5-stage system. So 5 stages is going to have a process control log sheet. You're going to basically have the operator, after training, of course, test for your pH in the system, your concentration of the chemical, again, your time, things like that. So time, temperature, concentration follows all the way through to each stage. And you're always, if you're running the line faster, that's something that needs to be noted. But at the end of the day, the reason we do them twofold is, one, we want the accountability of the customer. So they've been trained to do it purposely in order to be sure if there are any issues, we can refer back to a day or here or there that they were out of spec. And from that standpoint, then that's going to give them a record of what may have happened as well. And it's going to help the pretreatment company as well as the finishing company. So also at the end of the day, what you want, if there ever is an issue, you want the chemical company working with the finishing company and the customer in order to determine where that cause came from. And hopefully a solution follows.
Right. You mentioned training for the operators. What goes on in that? Because like I said, chemistry has to be, a lot of chemistry has to be dealt with differently. Talk about the training that goes into when you're putting, either in a new process, a new line. What all goes into that for those operators?
So for the most part, when you're I'll start from a startup. Basically, once a transition is made over to our chemistry, it's our responsibility to be sure that the customer is able to run their process efficiently. We're not there to run their process for them. We're there to train their people to be able for them to have accountability over their system. So as far as operator training, we may charge a tank. Once the tanks are charged and we've got everything looking the way it should, we'll do the initial titrations at that point, document everything on the process control log sheet. And then you're going to basically, for the first month or so, you may come in once a week and work with the operator to be sure they're understanding it. As you go further down the line, you may end up going once every 2 weeks. And then the goal would be to do once every month, depending on the size of the customer, of course, and be able to review the processes that they're performing to make sure their numbers are right, in agreement with you. Because titrations are dependent on operator eyes, which is kind of, you're looking for color changes. So everyone has a different color change. A lot of times with an SOP that we'll put together, we'll have a color change sheet for them to help them, get to where, because they may be testing to a certain, what they see, and then I may test it and I'm going to see something completely different. So we want to be as consistent as we possibly can with that. So, but again, at the end of the day, the reason you are training them is so they own their system and that they have the accountability on them and not on you in order to make sure they've got a quality performing process.
Exactly. It's kind of like how you raise your children to let them go, right? You got to let them go, do their own things, right? They'll still call you, ask to borrow money, things like that. Yeah, I'm sure.
I have a 25 and a 29-year-old.
There you go. You're still paying. You may not ever get out of that one. You mentioned startup. Walk me through what happens when you do a startup with that. I mean, I'm sure you're confident everything's going to work, but what happens when you do those type of things?
So as you indicated, the confidence comes from the testing that you've done up front. So you've got a process that you're trusting that's going to work. That's based on lab testing and things that we've done to get to the point of a recommended change. So the biggest thing is you're going to have to descale the tanks. You're going to have to get the old chemistry out from the competitor that was in there. That may take up to 6 hours, maybe 12 hours with everything. And then at that point, once that's circulated or been filtered out, basically, then you're going to go ahead and go with your charge. So your charge is going to be, say, we're going to run a stage 1 at 5%. We're going to fill that tank halfway. We're going to add 5% of the chemical, and then we'll fill it the rest. And then you got to get your heat in there. And most of the time, if you're running a zirconia process, that's the only stage that's going to have heat. Everything else would be an ambient temperature. So at that point, you'll sit there, wait for it to circulate, do your testing, do your titrations, work with the operators to be sure that they're comfortable with it again. And it's just every maybe 2-3 hours, once each tank is charged to where it needs to be, that process will be reinforced. So the goal is when they would have to recharge a tank the next time, they can do it without you. Like everything else, service is a great part of the industry. I mean, it's something that you'll never get away from, but accountability is probably more important. That's really on the customer side. So you're trying to do the best, and we're all in a sales position, so we're trying to get as many other startups as we possibly can. So you want to train them, get them rolling, and then do the necessary contacts that are needed to ensure a process that works.
Final question I wanted to ask you about. What do you see as like the biggest mistake people make in the pretreatment setups, and what's an easy way to avoid that if there is one? But what is the biggest one that you see out there?
Communication between The equipment people. It's a classic example would be a new system startup, and they bought the equipment and they never worked with the chemical company to identify which stage should have heat, the most basic thing. And you get to a certain point, and they're ready for a chemical selection company, and well, now they had the opportunity to design the system perfect if they work with the chemical company and if they work with the finishing company. So I would say the biggest thing that is made is that when a change is made, it should be communicated with the whatever the finishing supplier is, a group meetings, make sure everyone's on the same page, because at the end of the day, this is a team approach, and we're all in here to help the customer get the best results we possibly can, save them as much money as we possibly can as well. But also at the end of the day, make sure that they're confident in what we've done. So it is a true responsibility of the chemical company to make sure they're in there and they're stating exactly what's needed. Too many times you'll see they may know that we haven't been consolidated. They're going with an acid cleaner in stage one, and they built a tank out of mild steel. That's going to be a problem. Yeah. So
eventually it will be. Yeah.
It will be.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is really communication at the end of the day. And it's something that's the best part of our job. We get to talk to people. We get to enjoy the people that you work with. So that's basically what I would say. That would be the key point.
Great information, Gary. And I appreciate you giving us that, because, pretreatment sometimes not as well. People put as much thought and effort into it as they possibly should. I'm sure you realize that, and it's where it starts. And appreciate the time, and hopefully that you'll come back and talk with us again.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Seen and Solved by Hubbard-Hall. For more episodes, visit hubbardhall.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to like and subscribe, rate and review, and join us on social media. Produced by Awcast.